For decades, the world believed Princess Diana's final wishes were sacred, untouchable, and equal between her sons. But now, in a revelation that has sent shockwaves through the monarchy, Prince William has confirmed something no one expected. Diana's will does not include Prince Harry at all. Instead, it names William's children as the sole heirs. What could possibly justify such a decision? And why has this truth emerged only now? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The confirmation did not come in a press conference or a public address. It surfaced behind closed doors in a high-level royal meeting where constitutional matters were meant to dominate the agenda. Instead, according to those present, the conversation veered into territory so sensitive that even seasoned aides were left breathless. William, composed but visibly burdened, reportedly acknowledged the existence of a legal structure within Diana's will that bypassed his younger brother entirely. The room fell silent. Not the polite silence of protocol, but the heavy, disbelieving stillness that follows a truth no one was prepared to hear. For years, the public narrative painted Diana's love as evenly divided, fiercely protective of both sons. That image became part of royal mythology. Yet beneath that mythology, legal documents rested untouched, sealed under conditions few understood. When William confirmed that his children George, Charlotte, and Louis were named as primary beneficiaries, it wasn't just a financial matter, it was symbolic. It suggested foresight, intention, a generational pivot that shifted the axis of inheritance forward, skipping a link in the chain. Within palace corridors, the emotional fallout was immediate. Senior family members were said to exchange guarded looks, calculating what this revelation meant for an already strained brotherhood. Advisors scrambled quietly, aware that if this confirmation ever reached public ears, the optics would be explosive. The monarchy survives on continuity, on the appearance of unity. But this felt different. This felt like reopening a wound that had never truly healed. And then there was the timing. Why now? Why confirm something so volatile at this precise moment in royal history? Some suggest external pressures forced transparency. Others whisper that certain conditions outlined in the will had finally been met: age thresholds, succession milestones, or irreversible personal decisions that activated long-dormant clauses. Whatever the trigger, the effect was undeniable. A long-buried legal truth had surfaced, and with it, a flood of unspoken questions. Because this wasn't simply about inheritance. It hinted at something deeper, a fracture that may have been foreseen long before it fully formed. Over the years, subtle tensions between William and Harry evolved from private disagreements into public divergence. Different philosophies, different allegiances, different visions of duty. If Diana amended her will in her final months, could it have been influenced by early signs of that divergence? Was she acting not out of favoritism, but out of fear that the institution she both loved and challenged would one day demand impossible choices from her sons? Speculation now swirls that this was Diana's deliberate act of preservation. By placing her legacy directly in the hands of her grandchildren, the future of the monarchy, she may have sought to protect it from uncertainty, from volatility, from paths she could not control. It is a theory that unsettles as much as it intrigues, because if true, it reframes everything. It suggests a mother thinking beyond the present, beyond equality, towards stability. And hovering over it all is the quiet, undeniable truth that confirmations carry consequences. William's acknowledgement did more than clarify a document. It drew a line, one that may never fully disappear. But to understand how such a seismic shift could occur, we must rewind to the fragile months before Diana's death, when whispers suggest everything quietly changed. What if Princess Diana foresaw a fracture between her sons? What if, in her final days, she made a decision so controversial that it had to remain sealed for decades? Palace insiders now claim there was a hidden codicil, an amendment to her will quietly inserted under extraordinary circumstances. If true, it means Diana made a deliberate emotional choice that would one day redefine the royal bloodline itself. The idea sounds almost unthinkable. Diana, the mother who clung fiercely to both William and Harry, quietly altering her final wishes in a way that would one day divide them. And yet those familiar with the inner mechanics of royal estate planning insist that the final version of her will was not the first. There were revisions, conversations held in confidence. Legal drafts circulated discreetly among trusted advisors. Somewhere within that sensitive period, when Diana's relationship with the institution had grown increasingly complex, a codicil is said to have emerged, small in length, but monumental in implication. By then, Diana was no longer simply navigating motherhood. She was navigating survival. The monarchy she once embraced had both elevated and isolated her. She understood its power, its rigidity, its appetite for control. And as her sons grew, so did her awareness that they would inherit not just titles, but pressure, relentless, unforgiving pressure. Insiders now suggest that her thinking shifted during 3020's final months. Love remained constant, but strategy entered the equation. She began to consider not only what was fair, but what was sustainable. This is where the emotional conflict becomes almost unbearable. A mother's instinct is to divide equally, to shield both children with the same unwavering hand. But Diana also knew the monarchy did not operate on equal emotion. It operated on hierarchy, continuity, stability. William's path was clear from birth, the future king. Harry's path was always less defined, more vulnerable to drift. If Diana sensed that divergence deepening, even subtly, she may have faced a painful conclusion that preserving her legacy required an unconventional step. The alleged codicil, according to whispers, was drafted under strict confidentiality. Trustees and legal guardians were bound by silence, sworn not to reveal its existence until certain undisclosed conditions were fulfilled. Some speculate those conditions involved age milestones. Others believe they were tied to public roles, institutional alignments, or irreversible life decisions. Whatever the trigger, the amendment remained dormant, locked away while the world continued believing in an untouched, symmetrical inheritance. And beneath it all lingered a deeper concern, the future of the monarchy itself. Diana had witnessed firsthand how fragile public affection could be, how quickly narratives could turn. If her legacy were to endure, perhaps she believed it needed anchoring to the direct line of succession. By shifting inheritance toward the next generation, she may have been choosing longevity over immediacy, insulating her estate from instability she feared might one day arise. What makes this revelation haunting is not the legal maneuvering, but the timing. If tensions between William and Harry seemed sudden to the public, perhaps they were not sudden at all. Perhaps the EDS were planted quietly years earlier, in personality contrasts, in diverging temperaments, in subtle differences in how each son processed duty and rebellion. A mother as intuitive as Diana might have sensed those undercurrents long before they surfaced in headlines. And so the codic, if real, becomes more than a document. It becomes a window into Diana's private fears she could not voice publicly, but could encode legally. It suggests foresight, not favoritism, strategy, not spite. Yet even that explanation raises a question too heavy to ignore, because if this amendment was real, the question becomes unavoidable. What did Diana see in Harry's future that made her hesitate? They were once inseparable, bonded by grief, united by loss. Yet over time, subtle differences hardened into visible distance. What began as personality contrasts evolved into philosophical warfare. And according to palace whispers, Diana may have sensed this divergence long before the public ever did. Was her decision less about favoritism and more about foresight? In the beginning, their unity felt unbreakable. Two boys walking behind their mother's coffin, sharing a pain that no title could shield them from. That shared grief forged something powerful, almost sacred. But grief evolves. It reshapes identity, and as they grew into men, that early bond began to absorb the pressure of expectation. William leaned inward toward structure, toward the unyielding architecture of duty. Harry leaned outward, toward experience, toward questioning the very system that defined them. Neither path was wrong, but they were not the same. Inside palace walls, those differences were noted quietly. Advisors saw it in how each brother responded to scrutiny. William absorbed criticism, trained himself to endure it. Harry resisted, sometimes publicly, sometimes privately, but always with intensity. He chose containment. The other chose confrontation. Over time, Those responses stopped complementing each other and started clashing. What once felt like balance began to resemble division. Diana, fiercely intuitive, would have recognized that shift. She understood the institution's gravity, how it pulls harder on the heir than on the spare. William's destiny was defined before he could speak. Harry's was always ambiguous, shaped by proximity rather than position, and ambiguity can be liberating, but it can also be destabilizing. If Diana sensed that her younger son might struggle against the constraints of royal life, she may have feared what prolonged tension would do to him, to both of them. The palace, ever calculating optics, reportedly conducted its own quiet assessments as the brothers matured. How would each adapt to the modern monarchy? Who would reinforce its stability? Who might challenge it in ways that unsettled continuity? These weren't emotional questions. They were strategic ones. But strategy and family rarely coexist without cost. If whispers of a codicil are true, then Diana may have been weighing those very calculations against her maternal instinct. And that instinct must have been torn. She loved Harry's fire, his empathy, his refusal to conform blindly. She also knew the monarchy was not forgiving of unpredictability. To protect one son might mean entrusting the institution to the other. To divide equally might mean risking fragmentation. Every choice carried consequence. Every hesitation carried weight. There were moments, subtle but telling, when priorities diverged sharply. William spoke of continuity, of responsibility, of preserving what had been handed down. Harry spoke of reform, of transparency, of stepping outside inherited boundaries. Both narratives were rooted in sincerity. Yet sincerity does not erase incompatibility. If Diana IV saw that these philosophies would one day collide publicly, perhaps she sought to anchor her legacy where she believed it would remain structurally secure. The emotional cost of that calculation, if it happened, is almost unbearable to imagine. A mother quietly drafting language that would favor one branch of her lineage over another, not out of preference, but out of fear. Fear that instability could fracture more than a family. Fear that love alone would not be enough to hold competing visions together. And so the divergence that once seemed minor now appears prophetic. What the world interpreted as sudden estrangement may have been a slow unraveling that began long before headlines ever noticed. The deeper question is not whether Diana chose sides. It is whether she chose survival for her legacy, for the crown, perhaps even for Harry himself. But the real shock wasn't just that Harry was excluded, it was who replaced him. Instead of Harry, Diana's will reportedly names Prince William's children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, as direct beneficiaries, a leap across a generation. A statement written in legal ink but drenched in symbolism. Was this Diana's way of safeguarding her legacy beyond conflict? Or was it an unmistakable declaration about where she believed the monarchy's future truly belonged? If true, the decision is nothing short of revolutionary. In royal tradition, inheritance typically flows downward in predictable lines, preserving balance between immediate heirs. But this was not balance. This was a deliberate bypass. A grandmother reaching past her own son to anchor her legacy in the hands of children who, at the time of drafting, had not even stepped into public life. It suggests calculation, patience, a long view that extended far beyond the emotional storms of the present. Legally, naming minors as beneficiaries requires layers of protection, trusts, guardians, safeguards designed to prevent misuse or outside interference. That alone signals intention. Diana, according to whispers, did not simply leave sentimental gifts. She structured a framework, one that would mature alongside the children themselves. Assets preserved until certain ages. Access restricted until specific responsibilities were assumed. This was not impulsive generosity. It was architectural planning. But beyond legality lies symbolism, and that is where the decision becomes truly powerful. A grandmother choosing to tie her memory directly to the next sovereign generation sends a message that echoes louder than any press release. It says legacy is not frozen in the present. It moves forward. It evolves. By placing her estate in the hands of George, Charlotte, and Louis, Diana may have been embedding herself into the very spine of the monarchy's future. ensuring her influence would shape it quietly, but permanently. For William, the discovery of this clause reportedly landed with both pride and weight. Pride because it affirmed his children's place within the arc of history. Weight because it sharpened the divide with his brother in a way that could never be undone. Confirmation meant accepting that his mother's trust rested not just with him, but with the line that would follow him. It elevated his role from heir to steward guardian, not only of the crown, but of Diana's enduring voice within it. Publicly, the narrative of Diana's love remains universal, expansive, equally devoted. Privately, this structure complicates that image. It introduces nuance, strategy. It suggests that beneath the tenderness the world adored was a woman deeply aware of how power flows and how fragile institutions can become when personal fractures widen. By redirecting her inheritance forward, she may have been shielding it from potential turbulence, protecting it from being entangled in shifting allegiances or external influences. Some believe this was less about exclusion and more about insulation, a legal fortress built around her legacy so that it could not be redirected, diluted, or leveraged in ways she would never have intended. If tensions between the brothers were already forming in subtle ways, perhaps she anticipated that those tensions could one day intersect with finances, public perception, and influence. By securing her estate within the future throne's direct line, she ensured clarity. And clarity in royal terms is power. It also ties her name irrevocably to the monarchy's continuation. Every time George, Charlotte, or Louis steps into a new chapter of responsibility, Diana's shadow and her silent endorsement moves with them. Her legacy becomes inseparable from the institution's evolution. That is not a passive gesture, it is destiny-driven. And as this revelation spread quietly within palace walls, one person was left facing the deepest personal shock of all. Imagine discovering that your mother's final legal declaration excludes you entirely, no shared inheritance, no symbolic acknowledgement. According to insiders, Harry's reaction was not immediate rage, but something far more complex: hurt, confusion, and an unsettling realization that perhaps this wasn't a sudden betrayal, but a long-buried truth. The briefing, as it's been described, was private and carefully controlled. No grand confrontation, no public spectacle, just a quiet disclosure delivered with measured language and guarded expressions. The words themselves may have been clinical, but their impact was anything but. To hear that Diana's final written intentions did not include him, not even in shared form, would have landed with a force that cannot be softened by protocol. It was not simply about assets, it was about meaning. Because inheritance in royal life is never just financial. It is symbolic currency. It carries affirmation, belonging, acknowledgement. Being bypassed in a document drafted by a mother, revered for her fierce devotion, strikes deeper than numbers on a page. Insiders suggest that Harry did not erupt. He went inward. He began asking questions not aloud, but within himself. Had signs been there all along? Were subtle shifts in tone, in expectation, in maternal strategy, overlooked in the haze of grief and youth? The distinction between financial exclusion and emotional exclusion became the quiet battleground. Some advisors reportedly emphasized that Diana's love was never conditional, that legal structures do not measure affection. But such reassurance can feel hollow when confronted with written directives. The mind searches for explanation. Was this protection, punishment, preparation, or something more complicated, a calculated step meant to free him from obligations tied to the throne's future? The palace, aware of the volatility of the revelation, moved swiftly to contain fallout. Conversations were reframed, narratives were softened, the focus was shifted toward generational planning, toward stability, toward long-term vision. But beneath those strategic layers, the emotional undercurrent intensified. Because this was not occurring in isolation, it unfolded against a backdrop of already strained relations, public disagreements, and diverging philosophies. For years, Harry's narrative has revolved around grievance feeling sidelined, misunderstood, overshadowed. Now, confronted with this alleged clause, that narrative risked hardening into something heavier. Yet there is another interpretation whispered quietly among insiders, that Diana's reasoning may have been misunderstood entirely. Perhaps she believed Harry's strength lay outside the rigid structure of inheritance. Perhaps she saw that tying him too tightly to institutional assets would bind him to expectations he was destined to resist. Even so, understanding does not erase impact. Family dynamics shifted subtly, but unmistakably. Conversations became more cautious. Silences lengthened. Every interaction carried new subtext. What had once been disagreements over roles now felt entangled with legacy itself. The emotional temperature rose, not through explosive confrontation, but through quiet recalibration. In that space between hurt and comprehension, a new layer of tension emerged. Because if Diana's will truly reflected foresight rather than favoritism, then Harry faced a painful paradox, accepting that his exclusion might have been an act of protection rather than rejection. That realization does not soothe immediately, it unsettles. It forces reflection on paths taken, words spoken, alliances formed. And while much attention focused on how Harry processed the revelation, another truth lingered beneath the surface. Confirmation does not wound only the one excluded. It burdens the one included. But if Harry felt blindsided, William carried a burden just as heavy, the weight of confirmation. To confirm such a revelation is to choose transparency over comfort. Prince William reportedly faced a defining choice: protect his brother from painful truth, or honor his mother's written word. By confirming the will's contents, he may have preserved Diana's intentions, but at what cost to his own family bond? Those closest to the situation suggest this was not a single conversation, but a slow-burning dilemma. William was not merely a son in that moment. He was a custodian of legacy. The document carried Diana's voice, frozen in legal language, and ignoring it would have meant reshaping her final agency. Yet acknowledging it meant detonating whatever fragile equilibrium remained between Im and Harry. Silence would have been easier. Silence would have bought time, but silence in royal life eventually corrodes trust. The weight of executor-like responsibility hovered over him. Even if he was not technically the sole legal authority, symbolically he carried that mantle. As the future king, any confirmation from him would solidify the narrative. Advisors reportedly urged caution. Some argued the contents could remain quietly managed within trust structures, never explicitly verbalized. Why inflame tensions? Why reopen wounds that were already struggling to close? But others warned that concealment breeds suspicion. If Harry discovered the truth from another source, the damage would be irreversible. Optics loomed large. William already occupies the position of heir. The perception of being favored financially as well could appear excessive, even opportunistic. To the public, nuance is often lost. It would not matter that the beneficiaries were his children rather than himself. Headlines would simplify it. They always do. That awareness added another layer of hesitation. He risked looking like the brother who gained everything while the other stood empty-handed. Yet the deeper conflict was not about headlines. It was personal. Confirming the will's contents meant confronting the possibility that Diana's foresight aligned more closely with institutional continuity than with emotional symmetry. That realization is complex. It affirms trust, but it also isolates. William had to accept that his mother's strategic instincts placed him and his children at the center of her enduring blueprint. That is not triumph. It is pressure. Immense, suffocating pressure. Public loyalty demands unity. Private loyalty demands protection. William stood between those forces. Protecting his brother's feelings might require downplaying the document's implications. Protecting his mother's legacy required clarity. In choosing confirmation, he effectively chose permanence over temporary peace. Once spoken, such truths cannot be unsaid. They linger in every exchange, every handshake, every carefully measured statement. There is also the haunting possibility that by confirming the will, William locked the family into a new trajectory, not openly hostile, not dramatically explosive, but fundamentally altered. Trust, once strained by ideology and distance, now had inheritance layered onto it. That combination is potent. It reframes past disagreements through a sharper lens. It introduces new questions about motive, about foresight, about whether certain paths were encouraged or inevitable. And beneath it all lies the quiet awareness that history rarely offers reversals. Decisions at this level echo forward. William may have believed he was honoring Diana. He may have believed transparency was the most respectful path, but in doing so, he may also have cemented a divide that had previously retained the possibility of repair. The confirmation did not end the story, it accelerated it, and as the brothers recalibrated their fractured relationship, the monarchy itself began to shift beneath them. This wasn't merely a family matter, it was a constitutional tremor. Diana remains one of the most beloved figures in royal history. If her final will reshapes the narrative of succession influence, the ripple effects could echo for generations. Advisors, courtiers, and constitutional experts now reportedly debate the wider implications of a decision made decades ago. Because when Diana's name enters any equation, emotion follows. She is not just a former princess. She is a symbol, a moral reference point, a figure whose legacy still shapes public trust in the monarchy. If her final written intentions appear to favor one branch of the royal line over another, that symbolism becomes political currency. It alters perception. It reframes loyalty. And in a constitutional monarchy, perception is power. Inheritance does more than transfer wealth. It transfers influence. It signals endorsement. By anchoring her estate to William's children, Diana may have done more than secure assets. She may have subtly reinforced the inevitability of their authority. George, as future king, already stands at the center of succession. But Charlotte and Louis, too, gain amplified significance when their grandmother's legacy flows directly to them. It strengthens their narrative as the emotional heirs to Diana's enduring popularity. Inside palace strategy rooms, such shifts are never ignored. Senior advisors reportedly convened discreetly once William's confirmation circulated internally, not to challenge the legality that was settled long ago, but to manage interpretation. How should this be framed? As foresight, as stability, as a generational gift untouched by sibling rivalry? The wrong narrative could inflame public sympathy. The right one could consolidate unity around the future sovereign line. Public perception remains the monarchy's most fragile asset. Diana's memory carries immense emotional weight. If the public interprets her will as exclusionary, sympathy may tilt sharply toward Harry. If, however, it is positioned as strategic continuity, the focus shifts toward safeguarding the crown's next era. That balance is delicate. Too much emphasis on generational preference risks appearing calculated. Too little risks seeming evasive. Strategic repositioning began almost immediately, according to insiders. Conversations about legacy were reframed as conversations about long-term vision. Mentions of inheritance were paired with language about duty, stewardship, and preparation. The aim was clear: align Diana's final wishes with the monarchy's modern evolution rather than its internal conflicts. In doing so, advisors sought to transform potential controversy into reinforcement of continuity. The monarchy today operates under unprecedented scrutiny. Social media accelerates narrative shifts. Public loyalty is no longer assumed, it must be maintained. Against that backdrop, Diana's will becomes more than a family document. It becomes a symbol of where moral authority resides. By consolidating her legacy within William's direct line, the institution gains a powerful narrative tool, one that connects past affection to future leadership. Yet consolidation also carries consequence. It quietly centralizes generational authority. It strengthens the gravitational pull around William and his children, subtly diminishing peripheral roles. That shift may not be codified in law, but it exists in symbolism, and symbolism shapes influence more effectively than decree. Behind closed doors, strategists likely understood one truth: this revelation could either fracture public perception or fortify it. Everything depends on interpretation. Everything depends on how Diana's intentions are understood. Was she favoring stability? Was she anticipating division? Was she protecting the throne from uncertainty? Politics can analyze structure, strategy can manage optics, but neither can fully answer the emotional core of this decision, because beyond influence, beyond consolidation, beyond constitutional impact, there remains something deeply personal embedded within those legal lines. Yet beneath politics and legacy lies the most haunting question of all: what was Diana truly trying to say? Diana was more than a princess, she was instinct, emotion, and fierce protection embodied. If she bypassed Harry and named William's children instead, was it rejection or redirection? Some believe this was her final act of guardianship, not against her son, but against forces she feared would consume him. And perhaps this wasn't about exclusion at all, but preservation. To understand that possibility, we have to step beyond the shock and into the psychology of a mother who lived under relentless scrutiny. Diana did not parent her sons identically. She couldn't. William carried the weight of destiny from birth, and she shielded him from the cold mechanics of the crown whenever she could. Harry, born into the shadow of the heir, received a different kind of protection, emotional reinforcement, reassurance, a reminder that he was more than a spare in a rigid hierarchy. Her love adapted to their vulnerabilities. If the will truly redirected her legacy toward William's children, it may have been less about elevating one branch and more about liberating another. Harry's path has often been defined by resistance to confinement. He challenged expectations, he stepped beyond palace walls, he sought autonomy. Tying him to a substantial royal inheritance could have tethered him more tightly to the institution he seemed destined to question. By removing that tether, Diana may have been granting him something radical freedom. Maternal foresight is not always gentle. Sometimes it demands sacrifice. The institution operates on caution, on control, on minimizing unpredictability. Diana understood both the comfort and the cruelty of that system. If she sensed that Harry's spirit would clash with it, perhaps she chose to spare him from entanglements that could one day intensify that clash. In that light, exclusion transforms into insulation. There is also the profound symbolism of generational transfer. By anchoring her legacy to her grandchildren, she extended her influence beyond immediate conflict. She bypassed the storm and invested in the horizon. George, Charlotte, and Louis inherit not only resources, but responsibility. They carry the weight of her memory intertwined with their royal futures. That is not a light gift. It is a silent charge to embody compassion within structure, humanity within duty. But that charge comes with its own burden. To be named in such a will is to inherit expectation before adulthood. It binds them to a narrative that began before they could understand it. Diana's shadow will follow them, protective, powerful, but inescapable. The future king and his siblings will not simply represent continuity. They will represent her unfinished conversation with the monarchy, and in freeing Harry from that inheritance, she may have been acknowledging a different truth, that love and legacy do not always mirror each other. A mother can love fiercely while choosing divergent paths for her children. Equality in affection does not require equality in strategy. That distinction is painful, complex, and easily misunderstood. It invites judgment from those who equate fairness with symmetry. Yet perhaps Diana saw something others did not. Perhaps she believed Harry's strength would flourish outside the gravitational pull of her estate. Perhaps she trusted that William's line needed the reinforcement more urgently to stabilize the institution she both challenged and cherished. These are not comfortable interpretations, they are haunting ones. They force us to confront the possibility that her final decision was neither punitive nor preferential, but protective in ways that only hindsight reveals. And so the narrative shifts again. What seemed like exclusion begins to resemble foresight. What appeared divisive begins to echo with intention. The will becomes less a document of separation and more a map of divergent destinies, one anchored to the throne, the other unbound from it. And as the world begins to process this revelation, one truth becomes impossible. To ignore the story of Diana's will is far from over. The monarchy survives on tradition, but it evolves through decisive moments. If Prince William's confirmation stands, Diana's will becomes more than a legal document. It becomes a generational blueprint, a choice that reshapes loyalties, inheritance, and emotional truth. And as George, Charlotte, and Louis grow into their destinies, the question lingers, did Diana foresee the monarchy we are only just beginning to witness? What began as a private clarification has transformed into a narrative shift that cannot be undone. The public story of Diana has always centered on compassion, vulnerability, and rebellion against cold protocol. Now, layered onto that image, is something far more strategic, a woman who may have quietly engineered the future of the very institution she once challenged. If her will intentionally redirected influence toward the next sovereign generation, then her legacy is not frozen in memory. It is active. It is unfolding in real time. For the public, this revelation demands reinterpretation. It reshapes how loyalty is perceived, how favoritism is debated, how destiny is understood. Sympathy and scrutiny move in equal measure. Some will see foresight, others will see fracture, but regardless of interpretation, the monarchy's emotional landscape has shifted. Diana's final written intentions now sit at the heart of that shift, reframing past tensions through a sharper lens. For George, Charlotte, and Louis, the implications stretch far beyond inheritance. They are growing up under a legacy that now carries added weight. They are not simply heirs to titles, they are heirs to a deliberate act of endorsement. That reality will follow them into every public role, every ceremonial moment, every milestone. Diana's name will not just hover nostalgically above them, it will anchor expectations beneath their feet. Meanwhile, the bond between William and Harry stands permanently altered. Not necessarily shattered, but undeniably transformed. Confirmation has a way of crystallizing differences. What once existed as emotional distance is now intertwined with documented intention. Their relationship, once defined by shared grief, now carries layers of responsibility, justification, and unanswered questions. Brotherhood does not disappear, but it changes. And change, in royal terms, reverberates across generations. Diana's influence, it seems, refuses to fade. Even decades later, she remains a force shaping decisions, narratives, and allegiances. Her memory continues to challenge and reinforce the monarchy simultaneously. If this will represent her final strategic act, then it is one that binds her to the crown's evolution more tightly than ever before. She is no longer only the people's princess. She becomes the architect of a future quietly taking shape. There are whispers, too, of other documents, sealed letters, supplemental instructions, legal nuances yet to be fully understood. Whether speculation or substance, the mere possibility fuels intrigue, because history inside royal walls rarely reveals itself all at once. It emerges in layers, in timed disclosures, in moments that feel both shocking and inevitable. And perhaps that is the most powerful truth of all. Legacy decisions do not expire. They echo, they ripple forward, shaping lives long after signatures dry. Diana's will, if interpreted as confirmation of generational intent, ensures that her presence will be felt not only in memory, but in governance, in symbolism, in succession itself. The story does not close neatly, it lingers. It invites more questions than answers. It suggests that beneath every royal headline lies another chapter waiting patiently in shadow. Because in the House of Windsor, history ne'er, but truly rests it waits for the next revelation to surface. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.